The dust devils danced across Red Creek territory like hungry ghosts. Martha Hale's boots hit the ground one last time before her knees buckled. Behind her, 9 children stood in silence, their bare feet bleeding into Wyoming dirt. The year was 1886, and they had been walking for 3 days straight. No food, no water, no hope. "Mama, please!" Lucy's voice cracked. She was only 6 years old, but her eyes looked ancient. "Mama, if you fall, we all fall." Martha forced herself upright. Her husband's blood had soaked into their land 5 months ago during a dispute over water rights. The sheriff arrived the next morning with foreclosure papers. Just like that, everything they'd built vanished. She'd taken her 9 children and run, knocking on every door between their old ranch and Red Creek. Every single door slammed shut. "A widow with 9 mouths ain't a family," one man had said through his locked door. "That's a curse." Now Martha stared at another closed door ahead. The man who lived there had looked her dead in the eye before shutting her out. She felt her vision blur, felt the desert heat pressing down like a coffin lid. Maybe this was where their story ended. Maybe she should just sit down in this dust and let the world forget them. Then she heard hoofbeats. A rider emerged from the heat haze like something out of a fever dream. Tall in the saddle, face shadowed by his hat, coat billowing behind him. His horse slowed to a stop just feet from her family. The man dismounted without a word, boots hitting the ground with purpose. He looked at Martha, then at each child. His face showed nothing. Lucy stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Mister, nobody wanted my mama 'cause she has 9 kids. They all said we ruin everything. Do we ruin things?" The silence stretched so long, Martha thought her heart would stop. The wind picked up, swirling dust between them like a judgment waiting to be spoken. Then the man crouched down to Lucy's height and said 5 words that changed everything. "Good. I want all of you." Martha's breath caught in her throat. Thomas, her oldest at 13, stepped forward suspiciously. "You mean all 9? "All 9, the man confirmed, standing. "And your mother, too." He tipped his hat. "Name's Jonas Reed. Got a ranch 3 miles west. Been too quiet for too long." He glanced at Martha. No strings attached, just a roof. But here's what Martha didn't know yet. Jonas Reed had his own secrets. And before this story ended, those secrets would nearly destroy everything. Jonas didn't touch them, didn't pat heads or offer comfort. He just unhooked a canteen from his saddle and set it down with a small cloth sack. Then he stepped back, giving them space like they were wild animals who'd been hunted too long. Martha's eyes flicked to the food, then to her children's hollow cheeks. Every instinct screamed to grab it. But she stood frozen, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. Lucy crawled forward on her knees and opened the sack. Hard biscuits and dried apple slices. She broke a biscuit in half, giving the bigger piece to her younger sister Mary. Then she turned to Thomas with the last of the apple. Nobody spoke. Jonas knelt again, poured water into the canteen lid, and held it out toward the baby in Martha's arms. Not to Martha, to the child. He didn't touch anything, just waited. Martha's grip loosened. She guided baby Ruth's mouth to the water, and the child drank desperately. Her hand trembled against Ruth's back. Thomas moved to block Jonas's view of his mother, chin lifted in that way boys do when they're trying to be men, but don't know how yet. Jonas noticed everything. How Martha took no food for herself. How she rationed without calculating. How these weren't just children. They were a tribe, stitched together by something stronger than survival. "This land's rough," Jonas finally said. "You won't make it far on foot." He paused, measuring his words. "My ranch has space. You need a roof. I could use help around the land." Martha's spine stiffened. It wasn't the first offer she'd heard since losing everything, but it was the first without a visible price. "No favors owed," Jonas added, reading her face. "No strings. Stay because you want to. Leave when you need to." Lucy looked up at her mother. "Mama, can we try?" Martha's gaze fell to the dry earth, then to the small scarred hands clinging to her skirt. 9 pairs of eyes waited, not for orders, but for hope. She nodded once. Jonas turned toward his horse without another word. But what Martha didn't see was the letter in his saddlebag. A letter from the territorial government. A letter that would arrive in exactly 14 days and threaten to tear their new family apart before it even began. The ranch appeared like a mirage, fields of golden grass swaying endlessly, a windmill creaking against the evening sky, horses grazing peacefully near the fence. At the center stood a weathered house with a wide porch and a door hanging slightly open. No lock, no chain, just open. Jonas dismounted and walked to the porch steps. He noticed Martha falter behind him, her breath shallow. Without a word, he pulled the door fully open and held it. "You walk first," he said, voice steady. "This house is yours before it's mine." Martha froze. No man, not even her late husband, had ever said something like that. Her throat clenched, and for one terrifying moment, she thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just nodded and stepped past him, her children following like ducklings. Inside, dust floated in the light. The floors creaked. It wasn't fancy or even clean, but it was safe. Jonas pointed to the barn. "Clean straw in the loft. Quilts, too. I aired them this morning." He paused. "Just thought it was time." As the children explored the barn with hesitant steps, Martha stood alone in the doorway, staring at the rafters. She didn't move until the baby shifted on her chest. Then she climbed the ladder one-handed and laid Ruth down on the softest quilt she could find. The others curled into each other, nestling with the instinct of those who'd slept in ditches and under trees. Outside, Jonas didn't go to bed. He lit a lamp in the kitchen and started a pot of beans simmering. Found a crack in the barn roof and patched it with canvas and nails so the wind wouldn't bite through during the night. He moved quietly, carefully, not wanting to wake them. At one point he stood near the barn door, listening. Not the breath of one man alone with ghosts, but many. Small, uneven breaths like waves brushing ashore. The sound filled the yard and stole the breath from his own chest. It was the first time the house had held that sound since his parents died. But what Jonas didn't tell Martha was why he'd really brought them here. What he couldn't tell her yet. What would come out in exactly 13 days when that letter arrived. And when it did, everything would change. Morning broke with birdsong. For the first time in years, Martha woke without fear tightening her chest. She lay still, feeling quilts, breathing in hay and safety. Outside, someone was already moving. By the time she stepped into the yard, the scent of fresh coffee drifted from the house. On the porch, Jonas knelt beside a table, setting out a loaf of bread still steaming from the oven. He didn't speak, just nodded toward the food and stepped back. The children gathered slowly, 9 barefoot souls blinking in the light. They took slices of bread with trembling hands, eating like they didn't trust it to stay. Jonas poured coffee, sugared for the older ones, watered down for the little ones. Then he did something small that Martha would never forget. He reached for a wooden spoon and placed it in 13-year-old Thomas's hand. "Salt's yours to watch today. That means measuring, not dumping." Thomas blinked. "Me. You're the man of your bunch, right?" Jonas said simply. "Seems fair." Thomas's hand curled around that spoon like it was made of gold. He didn't say a word, but he sat straighter afterward. Martha watched from the porch edge, heart aching. Not from sadness, from something sharp and unfamiliar. Hope. By mid-morning, she had tied her hair back and rolled up her sleeves. The barn needed order, so she ordered it. Sorted tools, swept floors, soaked clothes in the trough, and scrubbed them with a flat stone. Jonas never said a word. But that afternoon, she found something leaning inside the kitchen door. A pair of boots, newer than anything they owned, wrapped in cloth. No note. They were her size. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. Outside, Jonas gathered the children under the cottonwood. See those clouds? The way they lean? Wind's coming from the west. That means colder nights. You mark it by your bones and the bend of the grass. He showed them how to collect dry kindling, how to feel for dampness in logs, how to stack wood to burn clean. His voice stayed calm, never sharp. When one child dropped a branch, he only said, "Try again," and waited. By midday, laughter echoed off the hills. Short, startled laughter, the kind that bursts out before memory can catch it. The children chased each other through the grass. Jonas stood by the fence, arms crossed, the faintest curl of a smile at his mouth. Martha watched from the barn with wet clothes draped over her arms. Something loosened inside her, a tension she hadn't known she carried. She hung the clothes on the line, fabric snapping in the wind like flags. Then she looked back at the porch, at the man who said little, who offered no pity, only space. For the first time since her husband died, she did not feel alone. But in 12 days, a letter would arrive. And when Martha learned what was in it, she would understand why Jonas had really brought them here. And she would have to decide whether to stay or run. Dust hung low over Red Creek's main street as Martha walked toward the general store. Baby Ruth balanced on her hip, a small sack of flour in her arms. Thomas led 2 younger ones by the hand. The rest followed, eyes down, weary. They needed flour. They needed food. But the town seemed to shrink around them. Windows shuttered. Faces turned away. As Martha stepped onto the boardwalk, she heard the whispers before they reached her ears. "She's the widow with 9 children, ain't she? Jonas Reed must be crazy to take on all that. He's hauling a burden home." Martha's face burned. She kept her eyes lowered, jaw tight. She didn't answer. She never did. Thomas paused at her side, shoulders rigid. Behind them, others sneered, shifting sideways as they passed. They bought the flour. No thanks, no kindness. Just the muted clang of coins on the counter. Martha carried the sack out, children following. She could feel the stairs drilling into her back. When they reached the corral outside town, Martha's knees trembled. She thought then of slipping away that night, leaving before dawn, before someone decided charity had limits. She didn't speak the thought aloud. She couldn't. At the ranch, dusk fell heavy. The children moved slowly across the yard, quiet now, faces closed. Martha worked in the small kitchen, kneading dough with hands that shook. She wondered how long Jonas would let them stay. How long before the town came knocking, or before he changed his mind. She laid the dough aside, stepped onto the porch, and pulled the baby close. The wind rattled the boards. She closed her eyes. Then she saw him, Jonas, standing beyond the fence, boots planted wide, silhouette against fading light. He watched her, not with disdain, not with pity, just steady. He didn't call her. He didn't come in. He waited. She stepped down the stairs and walked toward him. The air felt thick with unspoken words. She kept her eyes to the ground until she reached the fence. He spoke first, quietly. "You're planning to run, aren't you?" The question landed like a stone in her chest. She froze. Martha's breath came shallow and fast. She wanted to deny it, wanted to say she just needed time. But lying felt harder than facing the truth. His eyes held hers, no anger, no judgment, just concern. "You survived storms worse than gossip," he continued. "Don't let cowards decide your worth." The wind died. Only the soft creak of fence wood and distant lowing of horses filled the night. Tears came then, silent, hot, sudden. Martha dropped her gaze, shoulders shaking. Thomas came up behind her, put a hand on her back. One of the younger girls slid close. The baby stirred. Jonas waited, not pressing, just waiting. After a long moment, Martha raised her eyes. "I don't want to run," she whispered, voice small but firm. "Not tonight. Not if you still mean what you offered." Jonas nodded once. Quiet. Heavy. He didn't say welcome. He didn't say it's okay. He simply lifted his hat, turned, and walked toward the barn, as if to say the offer still stood. Behind him, Martha watched. The night felt less empty. The porch light glowed soft against the dark. The children clustered closer. For the first time since their journey began, Martha believed, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at belonging. But what she didn't know was that in 11 days, everything would be tested. And Jonas would have to reveal the real reason he'd opened his home to them. A reason that would make her question everything. The sky shimmered with spring's first light. Wildflowers bloomed along the fences. Bees hummed. The creek that wound through Jonas's land rushed with snowmelt. 8-year-old Evan, restless and wide-eyed, had begged to explore. Jonas, after days of quiet work beside the boy, finally nodded. "Stay close to the edge," he warned. "Water's high this time of year." Evan nodded, clutching a long stick like a sword. Martha was nearby, hanging laundry between trees. The younger children played with rocks, their laughter bouncing off the hills. Then came the sound that shattered everything, a splash, a scream. Martha turned just in time to see Evan vanish beneath the surface. "Evan!" she screamed, dropping the basket and running toward the water's edge, skirts catching on bramble. The boy surfaced once, arms flailing, mouth open, but the current dragged him swiftly downstream. Martha stumbled into the shallows, wild with panic. Before she could take another step, a figure thundered past her. Jonas. He tore off his coat mid-run, boots splashing into the creek as if the current were nothing. He dove without hesitation, arms slicing through the swollen water. Martha fell to her knees, clutching her chest, unable to breathe. The creek was angry from spring thaw, cold, fast, full of hidden stones. Jonas disappeared under once, twice. Then he rose with Evan cradled to his chest, the boy coughing and gasping. Jonas fought the current. One arm wrapped around the child, the other battling the pull of the river. A jagged rock struck his shoulder hard. He winced but didn't stop. Blood bloomed under his shirt, barely visible in the spray. His jaw clenched, legs pushing against the current, until at last he reached the shore. Martha rushed forward, pulling Evan into her arms. The boy sobbed against her, coughing and clinging. She checked his limbs, his breath, his heart. He was alive. Alive. Jonas stood behind her, soaked and bruised, chest heaving. "You're hurt," Martha said, voice breaking. He didn't answer at first. He just looked down at her, at Evan, at all of them gathered now at the water's edge. Then he spoke, quiet but sure. "Family keeps each other alive. That's what we are now." Martha blinked. Not guests, not a burden, not charity. Family. She looked up at him, water dripping from his hair, a gash forming beneath his collarbone. Yet his eyes were steady, not angry, not afraid. Something inside her cracked open. Jonas Reed, this man who had let them sleep in his barn, who had brought shoes without asking names, who had watched and waited and never demanded, had just risked his life for a child that was not his. Or was he? Martha wrapped her arms tighter around Evan, then turned to Jonas. Her lips trembled. "You didn't just save my boy," she whispered. "You saved me." Jonas gave a small nod, the corners of his mouth softening. "I know." The creek still roared behind them, but the world felt still. The children gathered around, touching Evan, checking his arms, his hair, the way siblings do when they've nearly lost one of their own. Jonas didn't move to speak more. He simply limped back toward the ranch, soaked and silent, as if none of it mattered. But to Martha, it was everything. And in 10 days, she would learn why Jonas had really saved Evan, why he'd taken them in at all. And the truth would be more complicated and more beautiful than she could have imagined. Jonas sat on the porch edge as dusk turned the sky pink and purple. The children played quietly nearby. Martha hung washing on the line, shoulders slightly stooped, as if she still carried the dust of all their years on the road. He watched her for a long moment before he spoke. "There was someone once," he began, voice low as the wind over the prairie. "A woman I meant to marry. We had plans, land, children, a home together. But she fell ill. Fever took her in the winter. I never walked that house with hope after." He paused, eyes distant. "Since then, these fences, these walls, they've been empty. Doors closed, windows shuttered. No laughter, no life." Martha stopped mid-motion, bucket in hand. She didn't turn. The soap smell of laundry mixed with the evening chill. The children froze, sensing something heavy. Jonas lifted his gaze to the horizon, then back to her. "When I saw you, I saw life return to this land. Not just land, everything I lost. I wondered if you and the children might stay, if you'd let this place be yours too." Silence stretched like a long draw on a worn pipe. The only sound was wind through cottonwood leaves and the soft rustling of clothes on the line. Martha dropped the bucket. Her throat tightened. She turned slowly to face him, shadows soft across her face. She swallowed. "I've lost too much. I've carried 9 children through dust, hunger, fear. Ever since he died, I've felt broken, been turned away. I don't know if I deserve kindness, if I deserve this." Tears coursed down her cheeks, catching the dying light. She shook her head as if to dislodge years of sorrow. Jonas watched, silent. Then he moved, placing his hand flat on the wooden table beside them, not reaching for hers, but close enough. "You are not a burden," he said, quiet but firm. "You are the bravest woman I've ever seen." His words hung in the dusk. Martha's breath caught. The children paused their play, eyes wide. He stood, dust motes drifting at his feet. He did not take her hand. He did not step closer. He said simply, "If your heart wants rest, stay. If fear pushes you away, go. But know this, you and your 9 children have already turned this place into a home." Martha's lips trembled. Her gaze flitted to the children. Lucy clutched a rag doll. The baby napped. The others stood uneasy, uncertain, looking to their mother. She swallowed again. Every fear, every wound, every lonely night crowded her mind. But something in Jonas's tone, in the quiet steadiness of his eyes, reached into her like sun through cloud. Slowly she nodded once, soft, uncertain, yet true. He turned away, lifted his hat, and stepped toward the barn. Behind him, the porch lamp flickered on, a single yellow glow in the growing twilight. Martha watched until his broad back blurred in the dusk. Then she turned to gather her children. No words spoken, only looks and motion. The kids followed her inside. She closed the kitchen door behind them. Inside, she stood alone for a moment. The walls creaked. The air smelled of dust and old wood, but she felt something new. Hope. That night, as the children fell asleep under patched quilts, Martha stood at the window and watched the stars. The wind whispered through the cracks, but she felt warm. Somewhere beyond the quiet, Jonas was already mending the roof, checking the fence, preparing the land. And somewhere inside her heart, a new root began to grow. But what Martha didn't know, what Jonas couldn't bring himself to say, was that in 9 days a letter would arrive. A letter that would explain everything. And when she read it, she would have to make the hardest choice of her life. The sun hung low, casting golden shadows across the yard. Dust swirled at the feet of 2 men approaching from the dirt road. Men Martha recognized instantly. Land agents. The very ones who'd helped force her and her children off her late husband's property. They dismounted slowly, arrogance in their steps. Jonas stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, eyes narrowed. One of the men smirked. "We heard you took in the Hale woman and all her extras." Jonas said nothing. The taller one stepped forward. "Just letting you know we remember what kind of trouble she brings. Thought you might want to reconsider playing savior." Jonas dropped the rag and moved to stand between them and the house. "She and those kids are under my protection now," he said flatly. The men exchanged a look, then shrugged as if it were no concern of theirs. They mounted their horses and rode off, the dust cloud behind them quickly swallowed by the evening wind. Inside the house, the children huddled near the windows, having seen it all. Martha watched Jonas from the doorway. He stood still for a long time after the men left, eyes fixed on the horizon. That night, the sky was clear, filled with stars so bright they made the ranch glow silver. Jonas sat on the porch, arms resting on his knees, silent. The door creaked open behind him. Martha stepped out barefoot, the wood cool under her feet. She hesitated, then reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, and rested a hand on his shoulder. It was the first time she had ever touched him. He turned to her, surprised. She looked into his eyes. Her voice was quiet, steady. "If the offer is still there, me and my 9 kids, we choose to stay." Jonas did not respond immediately. He looked past her to the doorway where Lucy stood holding her doll, tiny arms wrapped around her mother's leg. Behind her, the other children peeked out, 9 pairs of eyes waiting, hoping. He stood slowly, his height casting a long shadow behind him. His face softened. He looked at each child, then back at Martha. Then, with a voice just as calm and sure as that first day, he said, "Good. I want all of you." Tears brimmed in Martha's eyes, but she smiled, a smile deeper than anything she'd felt in years. Not because someone offered her shelter, but because someone saw her as whole, not broken. Saw her children not as burdens, but as blessings. That night they sat around the table, Jonas at the head, Martha beside him, the children packed around mismatched chairs and benches. They shared a stew made from simple things, but it tasted like everything they had lost and found again. The fire crackled. Laughter returned to the walls. Outside, the porch lamp glowed soft and golden, its light pouring through the windows of a house once empty. Lucy leaned close to her mother, whispering, "Mama, we're home, right?" Martha pulled her daughter close and kissed the top of her head. "Yes, baby, we're finally home." But what happened next, what arrived in the mail exactly 8 days later, would test that home in ways Martha never imagined. 8 days later, the mail came. Martha was in the kitchen kneading dough when she saw Jonas standing on the porch, envelope in hand, face pale as ash. She wiped flour from her hands and stepped outside. "Jonas, what is it?" He didn't answer immediately, just stared at the letter like it was a death sentence. "Jonas." He finally looked up, and his eyes were haunted. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you from the beginning." Martha's heart began to pound. Jonas handed her the letter. Official territorial seal, legal language. But one phrase jumped out at her. Failure to fulfill contract obligations regarding family occupancy may result in forfeiture of land deed. She looked up at him, confused. I don't understand. Jonas took a deep breath. When my parents died, they left this ranch to me. But there was a condition in the will, a condition from the territory. To keep the land, I had to prove it could support a family, a real family, within 1 year. Martha's hands began to shake. My fiancé died before we could marry, Jonas continued, voice cracking. I had no children, no wife, no family. The deadline was 3 months away when I found you on that road. The words hit Martha like a physical blow. She stumbled backward. You mean? Her voice came out strangled. You mean you only took us in to save your land? No. Jonas stepped forward, hands outstretched. No, Martha, listen. Don't. She backed away further, clutching the letter. Don't touch me. The children had appeared in the doorway now, sensing something wrong. Thomas stood in front, protective. Lucy's face crumpled with confusion. You used us, Martha whispered. We were never family to you. We were just convenient. That's not true. Then why didn't you tell me? Martha's voice rose to a shout. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Jonas's face twisted with anguish. Because I knew you'd think exactly what you're thinking now. Because I knew you wouldn't stay. But Martha, I swear to you, yes, I needed a family to keep this land. But the moment I saw you on that road, the moment Lucy asked if they ruined things, it stopped being about the land. It became about you. All of you. Martha shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't believe you. Then believe this. Jonas's voice broke. I jumped into that creek for Evan without thinking about contracts or land deeds. I patched the barn roof at midnight because I wanted you to be warm. I gave you those boots because I couldn't stand to see you walk in pain. None of that was about land, Martha. None of it. But Martha was already turning away, gathering her children. We're leaving. Martha, please. We're leaving, she repeated, voice like ice. Tonight. Jonas stood frozen on the porch as Martha herded the children back inside. Through the window, he could see her frantically packing their few belongings back into the tattered sack they'd arrived with. Thomas appeared in the doorway, facing Jonas. The boy's eyes were hard, but wet with tears. I thought you were different, Thomas said quietly. I thought you actually cared. Then he turned and went inside, closing the door behind him. Jonas sank onto the porch steps, head in his hands. The letter fluttered to the ground beside him. And for the first time since his fiancée died, Jonas Reed wept. Inside the house, Martha worked with trembling hands, shoving clothes and belongings into the sack. The children watched in silence, fear etched on their faces. Mama, Lucy whispered. Mama, where will we go? Martha didn't answer, because she didn't know. They had nowhere, no money, no prospects. They'd be back on that dusty road, back to closed doors and harsh words. But she couldn't stay here. Not now, not knowing the truth. Mama! It was Thomas this time, his voice stronger. Mama, stop! Thomas, help your sisters pack. No. Thomas stepped in front of her, blocking her path to the sack. Mama, stop. Please. Martha looked at her son, saw the determination in his eyes. Thomas, we have to go. He lied to us. He saved Evan's life. Thomas's voice was steady now, certain. He could have let the creek take him, Mama. If this was really just about land and contracts, he could have let Evan drown. One less mouth to feed, one less complication. But he didn't. He jumped in without thinking. He almost died himself. Martha's hands stilled on the sack. And Mama, Thomas's voice softened. He looks at you the way Papa used to, before Papa died. I see it. We all see it. Lucy nodded, tears streaming down her face. He loves us, Mama. I know he does. Martha sank onto a chair, the fight draining out of her. She buried her face in her hands. Maybe he did bring us here for the wrong reasons at first, Thomas continued. But Mama, you taught us that people can change, that second chances matter. Isn't that what you always said? Martha lifted her head, looking at her children, all 9 of them clustered around her, holding hands, united. What if he hurts us again? She whispered. What if he doesn't? Lucy replied simply. Outside, the sun was setting. Through the window, Martha could see Jonas still sitting on the porch steps, shoulders shaking. She stood slowly, walked to the door and opened it. Jonas looked up, eyes red, face streaked with tears. He started to stand, but Martha held up a hand. Don't, she said. Just listen. He nodded, settling back down. Martha took a deep breath. You should have told me the truth from the beginning. You should have given me the choice. I know. But... Martha's voice caught. But Thomas is right. You saved Evan without hesitation. You've never asked for anything in return. You've treated my children with more respect than their own blood relatives ever did. Jonas's eyes held hers, desperate with hope. I'm scared, Martha admitted, her voice breaking. I'm so scared of being used again, of trusting again. I know, Jonas whispered. I'm scared too. Martha stepped down off the porch, standing directly in front of him. So here's what's going to happen. We're staying, but not because of your land contract, not because we have nowhere else to go. We're staying because... She paused, swallowing hard. Because despite everything, I believe you. I believe you care about us. About me. Jonas stood slowly, towering over her but somehow vulnerable, in a way that made her heart ache. But Jonas, Martha continued, voice firm now, if you ever lie to me again, about anything, we're gone. Do you understand? I understand. And one more thing. Martha took a step closer, until they were inches apart. That land contract, when does it expire? 5 weeks. Then in 5 weeks, when it's fulfilled, we're going to sit down and decide, together, whether we stay because we want to, not because you need us. Agreed. Jonas's face broke into a smile, the first real smile Martha had ever seen from him. Agreed. Behind them, the children erupted from the doorway, running to embrace both of them. Lucy wrapped her arms around Jonas's legs. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder, and the younger ones danced in circles around them all. And for the first time since that day on the dusty road, Martha allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found more than shelter. Maybe they had found home. 5 weeks passed like a dream. Jonas taught Thomas how to mend fences and break horses. Martha learned every corner of the house, making it truly hers, hanging curtains, planting herbs, turning bare walls into a home. The children flourished. Color returned to their cheeks. Laughter became as common as breathing. And slowly, carefully, Martha and Jonas learned to trust each other. He taught her to read the stars for weather. She taught him how to braid Lucy's hair without making her cry. They worked side by side in the garden, shoulders occasionally brushing, neither pulling away. The town still whispered, but Martha no longer cared. Let them whisper. She had something they would never understand. On the night before the contract deadline, Jonas found Martha on the porch, watching the sunset. He sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Tomorrow the contract is fulfilled, The land is officially mine. I keep the ranch." Martha nodded. "I know." "So," Jonas turned to her, "what do you want to do? You said we'd decide together." Martha looked out at the fields, at the children playing in the yard, at the house that had become theirs. She thought about the woman she'd been 5 weeks ago, broken, desperate, afraid. And she thought about the woman she was now. "I want to stay," she said finally. "Not because you need us, not because we have nowhere else to go. I want to stay because—" She turned to face him. "Because you make me feel seen, Jonas. You make me feel like I'm worth something beyond just being a mother. And my children, they're thriving here. They're happy." Jonas's hand found hers on the porch rail. "And you? Are you happy?" Martha squeezed his hand. "I'm getting there." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Martha," Jonas said softly, "there's one more thing I need to tell you." Martha's heart skipped. "Jonas, you promised no more secrets." "It's not a secret," he interrupted gently. "It's just something I've been afraid to say." He took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since that first day. And I know it's too soon, and I know you might not feel the same way. But I needed you to know, because I promised no more lies." Martha's breath caught. She looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines around his eyes from years of sun and solitude, at the gentle strength in his hands, at the way he looked at her like she was something precious. "It's terrifying," she admitted. "The thought of loving someone again, of losing someone again." "I know. But Jonas—" Martha squeezed his hand tighter. "I think I might be falling in love with you too." His eyes widened. "You do?" "I do." Martha smiled, and it felt like the first real smile she'd smiled in years. "And that scares me to death. But I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of running. So yes, I want to stay. Not as guests, not as charity cases, but as family. Real family." Jonas stood, pulling her gently to her feet. For a moment they just looked at each other, the weight of all they'd been through hanging between them like a bridge finally completed. Then Jonas leaned down, slowly giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her softly on the forehead. "Welcome home, Martha Hale." Martha closed her eyes, leaning into him. "Welcome home, Jonas Reed." Behind them, peeking through the windows, 9 children watched and grinned. 6 months later, the ranch was transformed. New fences surrounded expanded fields. The barn had been rebuilt with the help of neighboring ranchers who'd finally come around. The house had fresh paint and a new porch where the children played every evening. And on a crisp autumn morning, with wildflowers braided into her hair and her 9 children standing as witnesses, Martha Hale became Martha Reed. The ceremony was simple. Just Jonas, Martha, the children, and the circuit preacher who happened through Red Creek once a month. Jonas wore his best suit, slightly too tight in the shoulders. Martha wore a dress she'd sewn herself from fabric Jonas had bought in town. Simple blue cotton, but it made her feel like a queen. When the preacher asked if Jonas would take Martha as his wife, his voice rang clear across the prairie. "I do. I will. Always." When he asked if Martha would take Jonas as her husband, she looked at her 9 children, her tribe, her heart, and then at the man who had seen them not as burdens, but as blessings. "I do," she said. "I will. Always." They sealed it with a kiss as the children erupted in cheers. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Martha and Jonas sat on their porch now, truly theirs, and watched the stars. "Do you ever think about that day?" Jonas asked. "The day I found you on the road?" Martha nodded. "Every day." "Do you think—" Jonas hesitated. Do you think things happen for a reason? Martha considered this. She thought about her husband's death, about losing their ranch, about walking for days with 9 hungry children. She thought about desperation and closed doors and harsh words. And she thought about a lonely rancher who'd lost his fiancée, who'd been facing the loss of his land, who'd made a choice that changed everything. I think, she said slowly, that sometimes terrible things happen, and sometimes those terrible things lead us exactly where we need to be. Not because it was meant to be, but because we made something beautiful out of the broken pieces. Jonas pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. We're going to be okay, aren't we? She whispered. Better than okay, Jonas replied. We're going to be extraordinary. And they were. The years that followed were not easy. Ranching never was. There were droughts and hard winters. There were illnesses and injuries. There were days when money was tight and nights when worry kept them awake. But through it all, they had each other. Thomas grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the ranch work. He married a schoolteacher from Red Creek and built his own house on the far edge of Jonas's land. Lucy became a teacher herself, educating children throughout the territory. She never forgot what it felt like to be unwanted, and she made sure every child in her classroom knew they mattered. The other children grew and thrived, each finding their own path, but all staying close to the ranch that had saved them. Martha and Jonas had 3 more children together. And when people in town asked if they were Jonas's real children or Martha's children from before, Jonas would fix them with a steady look and say, "They're all my real children, every single one." On Martha's 50th birthday, surrounded by children and grandchildren, she stood on that same porch where Jonas had first offered her hope. "What are you thinking?" Jonas asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking," Martha said, "about a little girl who once asked a stranger if her family ruined everything." And Martha turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become her whole world. "And I'm thinking about a good man who said exactly the right thing." Jonas smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Good. I want all of you." "You have us," Martha whispered. "You've always had us." As the sun set over Red Creek territory, casting long golden shadows across the land they'd built together, Martha Reed, formerly Martha Hale, formerly a widow with 9 unwanted children, realized something profound. She had spent so long being told she was a burden that she'd almost believed it. But Jonas had seen something different. He'd seen strength, he'd seen family, he'd seen possibility, and in seeing it, he'd helped her see it too. That night, after the grandchildren had been tucked into bed and the house had finally quieted, Martha found a scrap of paper and a pencil. She wrote simply, "Nobody wanted us, then somebody did, and that made all the difference." She tucked the paper into her Bible, a small testament to a journey that had begun in dust and desperation and ended in love. Because sometimes when the world says you're unwanted, all it takes is one person to prove the world wrong. One person to say, "Good, I want all of you," and everything changes. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe even for a moment that broken families can become whole again and that love can rise from ashes, then don't leave without letting us know. Hit that like button to show some love for Martha, Jonas, and those 9 brave little hearts who refuse to give up. And if you believe in stories where kindness makes heroes and love defies all odds, subscribe right now, because there are more tales waiting of dusty roads, untamed hearts, and families built not by blood, but by choice. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Subscribe for more Wild West love stories that prove hope is never lost, even on the hardest roads.